today we're going to review a topic that you should be familiar with, and that'll lead us into what we're going to talk about next week. So our focus here is going to be on getting these formulas down for circumference and area of a circle. So these formulas should look familiar to you. Area for a circle is pi times the radius squared. That's your formula for area of a circle. The formula for circumference of a circle is 2 pi times the radius. Those are the two formulas you're going to need. Pi r squared for area, 2 pi times the radius for circumference. So those are the two formulas that you're going to need. Just as a reminder, area is basically measuring if I shaded in this region, how much space would that shaded in region take up? Circumference is asking a question like perimeter is asking. It is asking a question like if I took this circular object and like unwrapped it or uncoiled it so that it was like a straight line segment, how long would that segment be? That's what circumference tells me. And the idea is that if I take circumference, that length, and divide it by the length of my diameter, then the number I get is exactly pi. That's what pi is. It is the ratio of the circumference to the diameter. So how we get pi has to do with circles. So you're going to see when we do formulas with circles, there's going to be pi coming up a lot. So that 3.141592653589792, so on. So that number has to do with this circumference and how we get that number. So in all of these problems, they're pretty straightforward. There's really, if we're getting the area, all we need is the radius. So basically the steps are going to, if you want steps, step 1 is find the radius. Okay, this is the step that's going to be different depending on the problem. Sometimes the radius is just going to be given to us. Sometimes we'll have to use something else to figure out the radius and solve for it. And then step 2, once we have the radius, is we are going to plug that radius into the formula to get out our area or circumference as whatever we're trying to find. So figure out the radius, step 1, and step 2, plug it into the formula. Step 3, there is no step 3. You're done. That's all we're doing on these problems. So let's take a look at them. I'm going to do a couple, and then I'm going to have you do a couple, and then you're going to have a homework assignment done for the week. So here we go. We're asked for the area first on these problems. So area is pi r squared, and I want to know what the radius is. And that's our step 1, is figure out the radius. Well, the radius here is not 24, because that is not a radius. What is the 24? Diameter. It's a diameter all the way across. That's why we did some vocab yesterday. So diameter is 24, means that the radius is going to be half of that. Right? Since diameter is all the way across, the radius is half of that. Which is 12. So that's our step 1. That's our step one. Figure out the radius. We have found the radius. So now step two, we just need to take that radius and plug it into the formula. Pi times r squared. Our radius is 12. And we are going to put our answers, what we call in terms of pi. And what I mean by that is that I don't want some big messy decimal as my answer. Right? If I took this exactly and put it in the calculator, or if I use 3.14 for pi, either way, I'm going to get some messy decimal. And I don't want a messy decimal. So all I'm going to worry about is the stuff that isn't pi. I'm going to work that out, and then I'm going to stick a pi on at the end of it. And that is our answer in terms of pi. So in this case, I'm going to deal with everything that isn't pi. So that's 12 squared, which is 12 times 12. That's 144. And then I still have the pi, so I'm just going to stick a pi on there. Feet squared. And that's how I'm going to leave my answer. In terms of pi. Feet squared, because it's an area. And if you look at the formula, that's what we did. We took a distance in feet and we squared it. So our unit should be in feet squared. So figure out the radius, plug it into the formula. Let's jump down to number 3. Number 3 is a bit more complicated. We are still figuring out the area. The area is still pi times the radius squared. But this time, figuring out the radius is going to be more complicated. Just a little bit more complicated. And you'll do this on number 6 too. Something pretty similar to this, but the formulas are going to work in reverse. What is happening is that you aren't given the radius. What you are given is the circumference. And I know the formula for circumference. It's right down here. Circumference is 2 pi times the radius. And what I know is that when I do that 2 pi times the radius, I should get 22 pi. So I'm going to take that 22 pi and put it in for circumference. 22 pi is the circumference, so I'm taking the 22 pi and I'm putting it in for circumference. And I'm going to use that to solve for my radius. We're using this to solve for r. So I'm trying to solve for r, and what I have right now is 2 pi times r. So if I want to solve for r, when I have 2 pi times r, then I'm going to divide to get rid of the multiplying by 2 pi that's happening right now. So I'm going to divide by 2 pi. When I do that, these pi's can cancel. And I have 22 divided by 2 is 11. So there is my solving for the radius. So step 1, find the radius. Check. That's done. So step 2, plug it into the formula. Let's do that. Area equals pi times my radius squared. Well, we just found that the radius was 11 using that circumference formula. And so that's going to be 11 squared is 121, and then I'm going to just stick the pi at the end. Yards squared, since it's an area. questions on any of this before we go on? This is one of the more complicated types of problems I can give you. So want to stop here and make sure that we're okay on it. All right. Moving on. Let's do a quick circumference one because I haven't done a circumference one yet. But they are going to follow the same process. We're going to figure out the radius, and then we're going to plug it into the formula of 2 pi times the radius. So watch how that happens. Our radius oh, good news. Our step 1, find the radius. Found it. It was told to us, so I don't even need to solve anything. It's just 6. All right, step 1 done. So step 2, plug it into the formula. 2 pi times my radius here is 6. So 6 gets plugged in for r. So when I get out my circumference, that's going to be, again, deal with everything that isn't pi. So I have 2 times 6 here is 12. And then I'm going to stick the pi here at the end. Now, circumference, when I label my units, circumference, remember, is if I unwind or uncoil the circle, what is the distance? So since it's a distance around the circle, it is just going to be in inches. It's not going to be in inches squared like area was. Because if you think about the formula, we're taking inches and then multiplying it by 2 pi. We are not ever squaring inches. So it's not going to be inches squared, it's just going to be inches because it's a distance. Areas are going to be in units squared. In fact, that's how you can kind of help with telling these formulas apart, because sometimes people confuse these formulas. Circumference is just in our units, our inches, yards, feet, all that kind of stuff. So it is not squared, so the formula is not squared. Area is on our units squared, in our yards squared, in our feet squared, so that's the one that has our radius getting squared. So this one's the area because we want the r squared in it. This one is the circumference. We don't want the r squared in it. But either way, your process is going to be figure out the radius with the information that's put in front of you, and then plug that radius into the formula.